Hello folks, so welcome back to another video of the Positional Chess Club. Today we are going to analyze the game between Gukesh D and Praggnanandhaa, which was played in the round 9 of Reykjavik Open 2022. So as we already know, it is a very happy thing for Indians to hear that Praggnanandhaa has won the Reykjavik Open of 2022. So without further waiting, let's get into the game. So Gukesh is white here and Praggnanandhaa is black. Gukesh starts with d4. Praggnanandhaa goes for knight f6, c4, e6, knight to c3, bishop to b4, e3, and castles. So this is the Nimzo Indian variation, Nimzo Indian defense. Particularly, we will see that this will transpose into the bishop attack. So bishop to d3 and now d5. C takes d5, e takes d5, a3, questioning the bishop, bishop to d6, and now queen to c2, eyeing the pawn on h7. Now b6 and now b4, trying to get space, and now c5. c5 is actually not a bad move, but it creates an isolated d pawn for black, which will give white a middle game plan, as we shall see in the further game. So b takes c5, b takes c5, d takes c5, and bishop takes c5. So now after move number 11, after all the exchanges have been done, black has an isolated d pawn. So we can stop the game here and try to find out like what's the plan for white here. So my question to you is, what's the plan for white? Well, the plan is that black has an isolated d pawn. So now, as it is in always all the cases, that now white will try to blockade this pawn and then try to grab this pawn, put much pressure using the rooks and the queen, and then try to get this pawn. This is the normal plan for white in this kind of positions where black has an isolated pawn. So let's see how Gukesh puts this plan into practice. Knight f3 developing, rook to e8, now castles, now bishop to g4. Now threatening bishop takes f3 and distorting the white's pawn structure, and now white plays rook to d1, allowing bishop takes f3. The reason behind is that there is nothing that white can do here to avoid getting taken by the bishop. If the white knight moves anywhere, like to d2 or e1, then the position is in favor of black. So the best way to continue here is by, just as I said earlier, just by putting pressure on this d pawn using the rooks and the queen, and then trying to get this pawn. So that is why Gukesh went for this rook to d1. Now bishop takes f3, allowing black to distort the white's kingside pawn structure. G takes f3, and now bishop to d6. Now bishop to b2, developing the dark squared bishop. Bishop to e5. So as we saw here already that the bishop has taken two moves consecutively, while this knight here on b8 is undeveloped. A better way to proceed from here was to develop the knight to d7, knight b d7. This could have been a much better way than going for bishop to d6. Anyways, now bishop to b5. Now after bishop to b5, there are two attackers on this pawn. One is the knight on c3, and another is the rook on d1. So let's see how Praggnanandhaa tackles this. Knight b to d7, and now knight takes d5, because the queen was one of the pieces that was protecting this pawn, and after knight b to d7, there is no more protection of this queen. So actually white will be up a pawn now from this position onwards. Knight takes d5, bishop takes b2, queen takes b2, and now rook to e5, bishop takes d7, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, and now after knight takes d5 and bishop to h3, after move number 22, white is up a pawn, and the only compensation for black here is that the not so good pawn structure of white around this king. So this is the only compensation that we can see here that black has received for giving up that extra pawn on the d file. So let's see how Praggnanandhaa goes forward. Knight to a6, queen to e5. Now queen to d2, trying to get active with the queen. Now f4. Now queen to e2. Rook to c1, activating the rook. Now queen to d3, attacking the a pawn. Queen to c3, offering an exchange. Rook to d8, and now queen to c7. h6, making a loop for the king. queen takes a7. So now white is up 2 pawns, 1 pawn on the queen side and 1 pawn on the king side. So let's see how Praggnanandhaa is able to defend this position. Knight to d5, and now bishop to f1, queen to g6 check, bishop to g2, knight to c3. Now obviously if rook takes d3, then rook to d1 will be mate. So after knight to c3, rook to f1, also not allowing, also just getting away from the fork, because knight was now threatening knight to e2 check, forking the king and the rook. So rook to f1, queen to d3, and now a4, pushing the a pawn upwards, and now rook to d6, trying to get a rook lift and come into the g6 file, a5, and now rook to g6, now king to h1, now king to h7, and now queen to d4. This is actually okay move, like queen to d4, trying to exchange of the queens, which will obviously favor the white here. So now black plays a very nice move here, which can be said as a double exclamation mark move, which is queen to f5. So what's the idea here? You are not actually losing the knight here on freely, because if queen takes c3, then you get rook takes g2, and this is a draw actually after queen takes c3. What's the idea here is that if you take on g2, then after queen takes g2 check, you obviously have queen to g4 check, and then after king to h1, you have queen to f3 check, and then it will be a draw by repetition. And if you don't take on g2 and you play something like queen to e5, just trying to keep the position, keep the pressure, then queen to d7, and this is a much harder endgame to win because of the activity of the queen and the rook. So queen to f5 is a double exclamation mark. Now the next move is the blunder, which is done by white in the position, that is by Gukesh. So the move played by Gukesh here is queen to e5. This is the problem of this move we will see in the next move. If you want to pause the video and try to figure it out yourself, you can see this, what's the problem here. Because after queen to f5, the black was threatening queen to a5. I think because of that reason white played queen to e5, but queen to e5 just is a blunder and gives black a drawing chance. And so the best move for black in this position is queen to g4, which is actually the reason why the commentators also said that perhaps in somewhere in the position this h3 was a good move. Obviously not at this point, because at this point I think queen takes a5 will be solid. Queen takes a5 is okay. So h3 would have been done good for at this position, but instead of h3, white played queen to e5, and now after queen to g4, the position is a draw, and the position is very much critical for white here now, because white is having so much pressure because of this distorted pawn structure, which made the white king very weak. So now this queen and this now the rook and the queen are now eyeing this g file, attacking the king, attacking the bishop, and now the knight is also here ready here on c3 to come into the game anywhere via d1 and e2. So we'll see how this plays an important role. And after this move, queen to g4, there is only one move in the position which can save white's game, which is bishop to e4. This will lead into a draw. After knight takes e4 and queen takes e4, this could lead into a draw. But even though this is a draw, black will be the one who will be having some sort of a pressure because of the unsafe king. So after this move, white played rook to g1. This is the next blunder which was played by Gukesh, and after the move by Praggnanandhaa, white had to resign. I can give you one more chance to pause the video and figure out the crushing blow. The blow is knight to d1, because after this move you are threatening knight takes f2, smothered mate. So somehow you have to stop to defend this f2 pawn, and the only way to defend this f2 pawn is by queen to b2. So you will have to give up your queen, and definitely this is losing position. So this was the game, and I hope you enjoyed the game. One of the main things that I liked about this game was that even though Gukesh lost this game, Gukesh had a really nice way of treating this kind of positions, and he did the same in this as well, by giving black an isolated d pawn and then playing a really well middle game. Actually, Gukesh was really well winning in the middle game stage, and due to these two blunders, Gukesh first came to a drawing position and then eventually lost the position. So I hope you enjoyed this game, and I'll hope to see you soon. So thank you.